The HOA president is at my fence, demanding I unlock my cabin for emergency evacuees. But these victims are sipping Starbucks in designer clothes. When I refuse, her reaction is terrifying. What she does next is unhinged, and the real reason she wants inside will shock you. This is HOA Unfiltered, and this rabbit hole goes deeper than you think. Comment below what state you're watching from, because this story will make you question everything you think you know about your own neighbors. Saturday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. The sun is just starting to burn the morning mist off the lake, and the air has that clean, crisp Wyoming scent that makes you feel like you're the first person to breathe it. I'm sitting on my porch with Scout, my golden retriever who possesses more common sense and better judgment than most of the human population. My coffee is hot, the silence is profound, and I'm contemplating life's most pressing question: scrambled eggs or pancakes for breakfast. In retrospect, that level of peace was the calm before a Category 5 hurricane of pure, unadulterated crazy. I was about to find out that my biggest problem for the day wasn't my breakfast menu, but a full-scale assault on my sanity. Then I hear it, a low, guttural rumble that doesn't belong in this sanctuary of quiet. It's not the sound of a neighbor's pickup or a passing delivery truck. It's the sound of multiple engines, a synchronized growl that seems to vibrate through the very ground beneath my feet. It's the sound of an invasion. I stand up, coffee cup still in hand, and Scout moves to my side, a low growl already building in his chest. Through the dense stand of pine trees that line my long dirt road, I see them. A convoy of vehicles that look like they've just rolled off the showroom floor of a luxury car dealership. A black Escalade, a pearl-white Lexus SUV, a Range Rover so clean it probably has an allergic reaction to dust. They're all heading straight for my property, kicking up a plume of dirt that feels like an insult to the pristine morning air. Leading the charge is HOA President Abigail Gonzalez. She wasn't walking, she was marching. Her face was a mask of manufactured authority, clutching a clipboard like a scepter. This wasn't a request. It was an invasion. She's wearing what I can only describe as her "I'm very important" outfit, a tailored pantsuit in a shade of beige that screams, "I attend community meetings for sport," complete with heels that are completely impractical for a dirt road. She moves with the unearned confidence of a petty tyrant, her eyes fixed on my cabin like it's a strategic objective she's been tasked to secure. Behind her, trailing like a bizarre flock of confused, wealthy ducklings, are 8 individuals. At first glance, they're supposed to be disaster victims. But my brain couldn't reconcile it. These weren't survivors, they were actors. Perfect hair, pristine clothes, and was that a champagne bottle? This wasn't an emergency. This was a performance. And I was the only audience member who hadn't received the script. My Marine training, the part of my brain that never really switches off, is kicking into overdrive. I'm automatically doing a threat assessment, and every single detail is a screaming red flag. I'm talking designer jeans with strategic, artfully placed rips that probably cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. Their hair, meant to look disheveled, has clearly been professionally styled to achieve that effortlessly messy look that actually takes 2 hours and a can of expensive hairspray. The accessories alone are a dead giveaway. One woman is wearing a delicate gold necklace that probably costs more than my property taxes. Another is sporting a watch that could fund a small country for a year. They look less like they've fled a natural disaster and more like they've just finished a photo shoot for a magazine called Privileged People Pretending to Suffer. Vincent Watson, she hollers, her voice cutting through the morning calm like a chainsaw. She uses my full name, the kind of formal address reserved for courtrooms and disciplinary hearings, and it instantly puts me on edge. These families have been displaced by the water emergency. As HOA president, I'm declaring your cabin an official community shelter. She delivers this proclamation with the gravity of someone announcing the end of a war, her clipboard held high as if it were a sacred tablet bearing a divine decree. But the details just keep getting more absurd. Every single one of these supposed evacuees is carrying matching designer luggage. I mean, perfectly matching. A complete set of Louis Vuitton bags, with the price tags still dangling from the handles as if they detoured through a high-end department store on their way out of the flood zone. And the makeup. The women have flawless, professionally applied makeup. The kind that's waterproof, smudge-proof, and apparently flood-proof. Not a single streak of mascara, not a hint of foundation out of place. They're supposedly fleeing a water emergency, yet there's not one speck of mud on any of their expensive shoes. My personal favorite detail, the one that truly cements this as a masterclass in terrible acting, is the trio of victims openly sipping from Starbucks cups. They're holding their lattes and macchiatos, looking around my property with the detached curiosity of tourists at a scenic overlook. I'm half expecting one of them to ask if I have a gift shop. A thought forms in my head, sharp and clear. Either Wyoming just experienced the most polite, boutique flood in human history, or I'm watching the worst improvisational acting troupe this side of a high school drama club. Abigail, I call down from the safety of my porch, not even bothering to set down my coffee cup. My voice is calm, level, betraying none of the bewildered irritation brewing inside me. I hate to break up your little theater production here, but those aren't evacuees. They look like they're heading to brunch at the country club. That's when Scout chimes in, his low growl turning into a more determined, rumbling warning. That dog has a sixth sense for insincerity, and right now, his senses are screaming. He's never steered me wrong when it comes to reading people, and he's decided this entire delegation is a threat. My comment seems to throw Abigail off her script for a moment. But one of her cast members, a blonde woman wearing enormous sunglasses that probably cost more than my truck payment, decides it's her time to shine. She pulls out her iPhone, pivots, and starts taking a series of selfies with my cabin artfully framed in the background, a pout plastered on her face as if to say, surviving in style. Another member of the troupe, a man in a polo shirt that's been artfully distressed by someone who has clearly never done a day of actual labor, chimes in with a voice loud enough for the entire county to hear. Excuse me, is there Wi-Fi inside the cabin? I really need to update my social media about this whole experience. And that's the moment of absolute clarity. It hits me like a freight train loaded with pure, undeniable reality. I recognize these people. Not personally, but I've seen their faces before. The blonde with the designer sunglasses is Jennifer, Abigail's own cousin, who lives in a sprawling mansion about 2 miles down the road. The one with the circular driveway and a fountain in the front yard that looks like it was imported from a palace in Italy. The polo shirt guy, who is now pretending to comfort an invisible, crying child, is Robert, her nephew. He drives a Tesla and runs some tech startup that probably makes more money in a single month than I see in a year. This isn't a group of displaced strangers. This is Abigail's family. Nice try, Abigail, I say, finally walking down the porch steps. I keep what I call a tactical distance, close enough to communicate clearly, but far enough to react if she decides to escalate from verbal nonsense to physical crazy. But I remember Jennifer from your family barbecue photos on the community bulletin board. Hard to forget someone who wore a $5,000 dress to a backyard cookout. The look on Abigail's face is absolutely priceless. It's a fleeting, unguarded moment of pure shock, like a magician whose trick has just been exposed by a child in the front row. For about 2 seconds, she seems genuinely stunned that I've seen through her transparent charade. Then, her expression undergoes a stunning transformation, morphing from surprise to pure, undiluted rage. How dare you question official emergency response procedures? She shrieks, and I swear the squirrels in the surrounding forest probably heard that and decided to pack their nuts and relocate to a quieter, less hysterical state. These people have nowhere to go. She's waving that clipboard around like a medieval weapon, and I notice her hands are shaking. It's not from the cold. It's a pleasant 75 degrees outside. It's from a barely controlled fury that seems to be radiating from her in waves. As HOA president, I have the authority to designate emergency shelters for community safety. The way she spits out the word authority tells me everything I need to know. This isn't about safety. It's about power. That's her cue, and her family members, bless their privileged hearts, really start earning their acting fees. Jennifer approaches my fence, launching into what can only be described as a community theater-level dramatic performance. "Sir," she says, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, She actually consults what appear to be notes written on her phone before continuing. Our children are scared and cold. We just need a warm place for them to rest until this emergency passes. The funny thing is, there are no children anywhere in sight. She's gesturing dramatically toward a patch of empty air, as if introducing me to a whole family of invisible, freezing toddlers. Robert decides to join the performance, stepping forward with a hand over his heart. "We've lost everything in the flood, sir. Please have mercy on our families and let us use your cabin for shelter." While delivering this heart-wrenching monologue, he's literally checking the time on his Rolex and taking another sip from what is unmistakably a $5 coffee drink. The entire scene is so profoundly absurd that I'm starting to wonder if I've lost my mind. Am I being pranked by some elaborate new reality show? I keep looking around for hidden cameras, half expecting a production crew to jump out from behind a tree and yell, "Gotcha." But then I notice something that makes my blood run cold. My neighbor, Jack Rivera, is standing across the street, partially hidden by a large oak tree. He's filming the entire exchange on his phone. Now, Jack has always been a good guy. Quiet, respectful, minds his own business. We have the kind of neighborly relationship that consists of polite waves and the occasional shared tool. But the way he's positioning himself, the steady, deliberate way he's holding that phone, the specific angle he's chosen, this isn't the casual documentation of neighborhood weirdness. This is systematic evidence gathering. A cold knot tightens in my stomach. But why film it? Was he helping me, or was he part of it? The question was making my skin crawl. Evidence for whom? The tension in the air is getting thicker by the second. Abigail can see her elaborate performance is falling apart faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. She's looking around desperately, her eyes darting between her family members, probably trying to figure out how to salvage this unmitigated disaster of a plan. Her fake evacuees are starting to look genuinely uncomfortable. I guess pretending to be homeless is much harder work than they anticipated when they signed up for whatever this bizarre family activity is. Jennifer has completely given up on hiding the champagne bottle she'd been trying to conceal behind her back and is now taking open swigs from it like she's at a tailgate party. Robert is scrolling through his phone with the focused intensity of someone desperately looking for an escape route from an increasingly awkward social situation. I thought the insanity was over. I was wrong. The next morning, I found fresh tire tracks circling my cabin from midnight. But the footprints leading to my bedroom window, they were too small to be Abigail's. Someone else had been watching me sleep. Sunday morning hits me like a bad hangover, except I hadn't touched a drop of anything stronger than coffee. I'm jolted awake at 6:30 a.m. by Scout barking his head off, a frantic, insistent sound that says something is very wrong. I stumble to my bedroom window, still half asleep, and my heart sinks. There's Abigail again. But this time, she's brought reinforcements, and they're wearing official-looking badges that probably cost more to fake than my truck is worth. "Vincent Watson," she calls out, her voice amplified by what sounds like a cheap megaphone. It carries that same fake authority tone that makes my teeth itch. "We're here for the mandatory safety inspection of your emergency shelter violation." She's decked out in what looks like a full county emergency response uniform, complete with a high-visibility reflective vest and the clipboard, which has somehow grown overnight from a simple board into a full-sized, intimidating-looking folder stuffed with papers. Behind her, the same 8 family members from yesterday are back, but they've all had a costume change. Now they're wearing matching emergency response volunteer badges that look like they came from a costume shop that was having a clearance sale. My immediate thought is, either Wyoming had a complete government overhaul overnight, or Abigail spent her entire evening shopping at fakeauthority.com. The thing that really gets me, the thing that is almost impressive in its audacity, is how seriously they're all taking this ridiculous performance. Jennifer, yesterday's champagne-sipping evacuee, is now carrying her own clipboard and wearing a pair of safety goggles pushed up on her forehead, as if she's about to conduct a structural engineering survey on the Hoover Dam. Robert has traded his pre-distressed polo shirt for a hard hat and a reflective vest, and he's strutting around my property line like he's the site foreman on a major construction project. The other family members are scattered around my fence, taking measurements of absolutely nothing with brightly colored tools that probably came from the same costume shop as their phony badges. It would be hilarious if it weren't so utterly pathetic. It's like watching a group of adults play dress up with the unwavering dedication of method actors preparing for a Shakespearean tragedy. Abigail, I called down from my porch, not bothering to hide the amusement in my voice. Those badges look about as official as a $3 bill. What's next? Are you going to tell me you're the Secretary of Defense? That's when she pulls out what I assume is supposed to be her secret weapon. It's a laminated document, and she waves it around like it's the Declaration of Independence itself. This is an official county emergency declaration, signed by the emergency coordinator, she shouts, marching right up to my fence with the unshakable confidence of someone who has become completely divorced from reality. Your cabin has been designated as a community shelter space, and we need immediate access for a safety compliance inspection. Here's where years of Marine training really pay off. I've learned to spot fake documents from a mile away, and this thing Abigail is waving around has more red flags than a Soviet military parade. First, the letterhead. It looks like something a high school kid would design for a school project about government bureaucracy, complete with a clip art eagle that's slightly pixelated. Second, the signature of the supposed emergency coordinator is clearly photocopied. I can see the fuzzy edges where someone tried to paste it into the document digitally. Third, and this is the kicker that really makes me want to laugh out loud, it's laminated. Now, I'm no expert on government procedures, but I'm pretty sure that official, time-sensitive emergency declarations don't get the elementary school lunch menu treatment. Nice try, I tell her, pulling out my own phone and making a point of ensuring she can see exactly what I'm doing. But I already called the actual county emergency services this morning. I talked to a very nice lady named Patricia who's been working there for 15 years. Funnily enough, she's never heard of any emergency coordinator, any emergency declaration, or any safety compliance inspection program for private residences. The look on Abigail's face when I say this is absolutely priceless. It's the look of someone who has just been caught cheating on their final exam in front of the entire class. But instead of backing down like a reasonable, sane person would, she doubles down on the crazy. She's like a gambler betting her life savings on a losing hand. That's because the situation is so urgent they haven't had time to update their systems. She screams, and I swear I can see spit flying from her mouth. Every minute you delay is putting lives at risk. The way she delivers this line, you'd think my cabin was the last lifeboat on the Titanic and I was refusing to let people on board. But here's what really gets me. Her voice is cracking. It's not from genuine emotion, but from the sheer strain of trying to maintain this elaborate, crumbling lie while watching it fall apart in real time. I'm standing here watching a woman have a complete psychological break right on my front lawn. And for a fleeting moment, a part of me almost feels sorry for her. Almost. That's when her family members, cued by her desperation, really start earning their acting fees again. And let me tell you, they're putting in a performance that would make a community theater director weep with pride. They begin approaching my fence one by one, each armed with their own sob story that sounds like it was written by someone who's only experienced emergencies by watching them in movies. Sir, my grandmother needs her medication, and it's stored in a warm cabin, pleads Jennifer, despite the fact that it's a pleasant 75 degrees outside and there is no grandmother anywhere to be seen. Unless, of course, she's invisible, which at this point in the proceedings wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Our baby can't sleep outside another night, adds Robert, gesturing toward a distinct crying sound that is obviously coming from a speaker on his phone. I can actually see him adjust the volume with his thumb while he's talking, like he's mixing the sound effects for a low-budget radio drama. Just let us unlock the cabin long enough to warm up, begs another cousin whose name I don't know. She's delivering this desperate plea while literally wearing a full-length fur coat that probably costs more than most people's annual salary. The whole performance is so ridiculously over the top that I'm starting to wonder if this is some kind of elaborate social experiment designed to test how much concentrated absurdity one person can witness before their brain just gives up and melts. But then it hit me. A single word, repeated like a mantra. Unlock. Not open up or let us in or give us access. Unlock. My Marine training screamed at me. They didn't just want access. They needed a key. They knew something about my own home that I didn't. The chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the Wyoming air. This wasn't random harassment. They had specific knowledge about my property, knowledge I didn't have about my own home. The whole scene feels so surreal that I keep looking around for hidden cameras, half expecting someone to jump out and yell, "You're on candid camera." But then, my eyes drift across the street. I glance over to see Jack, back in the exact same spot as yesterday. Phone out, recording everything with the steady, unnerving precision of someone who's done this before. The way he's positioned himself, the deliberate angle he's chosen, the fact that he's there at exactly the right time 2 days in a row, this is not a coincidence. This is coordination. But coordination with whom? And for what purpose? All right, enough. I say, walking down to the fence line. I make sure my voice is loud and carries the kind of authority that comes from actually knowing what you're talking about, not from wearing a fake badge. Abigail, I called the county directly. There is no emergency. There is no coordinator. There is no inspection program. Your family needs to stop this performance and leave my property immediately. But instead of the look of defeat I'm expecting, Abigail's eyes light up with something that looks dangerously close to a bizarre mixture of triumph and desperation. "Performance," she shrieks, her voice cracking with what sounds like genuine emotion for the first time in this whole bizarre 2-day experience. Performance. These are real families with real needs. You heartless. Her voice breaks completely, and for a moment, just a single, fleeting moment, I almost feel sorry for her again. There's something in her eyes that goes beyond simple greed or even obsession. There's pain there, old pain, the kind that's been festering for a very long time. But then she keeps talking, and any shred of sympathy evaporates like morning dew in a desert. That's when things take a turn from merely annoying and bizarre to genuinely disturbing. Her family members, as if on a silent command, suddenly surround my cabin. They are not acting threateningly, not yet, but they are moving with a purpose, like they are conducting some kind of coordinated survey that they've obviously practiced beforehand. They start banging on my windows. It's not violent, but it's methodical, rhythmic, like they are testing the structure for weak points, searching for a vulnerability. "We know you're inside." Jennifer calls through the walls in a loud, sing-song voice, despite the fact that I'm clearly standing right in front of them in broad daylight. "Just unlock the door for 5 minutes so we can make sure it's safe." Then, in the chaos, I hear a voice, a harsh whisper from across the street. It's Jack. He's lowered his phone and is half hidden behind the oak tree. "Vincent," he hisses, his voice urgent. "She's not just after your cabin. There's something buried underneath it from 30 years ago." But before he can explain, the blinding headlights of a car turning onto my road flood the yard, and he vanishes back into the shadows. What is Abigail really searching for? 11 p.m. at the old oak tree. The location Jack had specified in a hurried text message. I'm starting to feel like I'm living in some kind of low-budget spy novel. The Wyoming night is dead quiet, except for the incessant chirping of crickets and the sound of my own heartbeat, which is doing a pretty good impression of a drum solo. Scout is at home, and I feel naked without him, my senses on high alert. Jack shows up exactly on time, moving through the shadows with a practiced ease that tells me he's done this before. The moonlight catches his face, and I can see he's genuinely scared. This isn't the kind of nervousness you get when you're late for work. This is the bone-deep fear of someone who knows they're in way over their head. "Vincent," he says, his voice a strained whisper. He keeps looking around, scanning the darkness as if he expects Abigail to leap out from behind a tree armed with her clipboard and a fresh set of lies. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound completely insane, but you need to hear it. He pulls out a thick manila envelope, stuffed with documents and photographs I've never seen before. He hands me a stack of old, black and white pictures of my cabin, dating from what looks like the 1990s. In 1993, the guy who owned your cabin before you bought it from his estate, he buried something valuable underneath the foundation. something worth enough money that people have been looking for it ever since. I'm staring at these photos, and my brain is struggling to process what Jack is telling me. The pictures show my cabin, but it looks younger, newer. It's surrounded by construction equipment, and what appears to be a partially filled-in well is visible near the foundation. What kind of valuable something are we talking about here? I ask, though a part of me already knows I'm not going to like the answer. Jack takes a deep breath, the kind you take before dropping a bomb that's going to change everything. Cash, gold, maybe documents. Nobody knows for sure. But Abigail's father knew about it before he died. He spent years trying to buy your property, and when that didn't work, he told Abigail exactly where to look. The pieces start falling into place, clicking together to form a picture of pure, obsessive crazy. So, the emergency shelter thing, I say slowly, connecting the dots. That's just her cover story to get inside my cabin. Jack nods grimly, pulling more documents from his seemingly bottomless envelope. She needs access to the basement entrance from inside the cabin. The whole family performance, the fake authority badges, the constant harassment, it's all designed to get you to unlock that cabin so they can excavate from the inside, where nobody can see them. He shows me handwritten letters, actual correspondence between Abigail and her family members, discussing the plan in meticulous detail. They detail who would play what role in the fake emergency, what props they would need, and what their cover story would be. The letters are damning, irrefutable evidence of premeditation. One from Jennifer reads, "I can play the desperate mother role, but I need you to coach me on what flood victims actually look like." Another from Robert discusses borrowing emergency response equipment from a buddy's security company and making sure their stories align about a non-existent water main break. These aren't just recordings that could be dismissed as hearsay. This is written proof of a conspiracy in Abigail's own family's handwriting. "Vincent," Jack continues, and his voice is heavy with a guilt that seems to crush him. "There's something else you need to know about why I moved in next to your property." The way he says it makes my stomach drop, like I've just stepped off a cliff in the dark. "Abigail arranged for me to buy that house, specifically so I could monitor your activities and report back to her about when you might be vulnerable to their plan." He hands me a stack of text messages printed out on crisp white paper. Months of communication between him and Abigail. In them, he reports on my daily routines, when I leave for work, when I have visitors, the rare occasions when the cabin sits empty for a few hours. The betrayal hits me like a physical blow. A cold, nauseating wave washes over me. Even though a part of me had suspected something like this, seeing the proof in black and white is devastating. "So everything?" I ask, my voice barely a whisper. The neighborly friendship, the help with the yard work, the conversations over the fence, it was all surveillance? Jack looks genuinely pained as he nods. "It started that way. Abigail convinced me that you had stolen property that belonged to our family, and she just wanted to know when you might be planning to sell or move. But Vincent, after getting to know you, after seeing how decent and normal you are, I realized she was lying. About everything." He pulls out another document that makes my blood run cold. It's a detailed floor plan of my cabin, including precise measurements and notes about potential basement access points. The plan is annotated in Abigail's unmistakable, spiky handwriting with notes like "foundation weak point here" and "interior access most likely through kitchen floor." She's been planning this infiltration for months, studying my home like a military target. She had me take photos of your cabin from different angles, measure distances from the road, even document your security measures, Jack admits, showing me pictures of my own home that I never knew were being taken. That's when he drops the bombshell that changes everything about how I understand this entire situation. "Vincent, I found something in Abigail's documents that she doesn't know I saw. It was a letter from a lawyer, dated 6 months ago. It was discussing establishing adverse possession claims through documented community use attempts." He hands me a photocopy of legal correspondence that makes my stomach turn. This isn't just about some mythical treasure. She's been building a legal case to claim ownership of my entire property through some kind of obscure squatters' rights law. The legal document explains everything. The fake emergency responses, the repeated demands for access, the escalating harassment. It was all a calculated strategy to create a paper trail, to build a record showing that the community had attempted to use my cabin for legitimate purposes and that I had unreasonably denied them. She's not just obsessed with what might be buried under your cabin, Jack explains, his voice urgent. She's trying to steal your entire property, using the treasure story as the justification for her access attempts. As I'm trying to process this new level of insanity, we hear the sound of vehicles in the distance. Multiple engines, moving slowly, cautiously, like they're trying to avoid detection. Jack grabs my arm and points toward my property. Through the trees, we can see the distinct beams of flashlights moving around my cabin. She's conducting another survey tonight, he whispers urgently, probably trying to figure out exactly where to dig when she finally thinks she has legal access. Through the trees, I can make out shadowy figures carrying what looks like metal detectors and some kind of ground-penetrating radar equipment, moving systematically around my cabin's foundation. This is insane, I mutter, but even as I say the words, a plan is already formulating in my mind. A cold, hard resolve is settling in my gut. Jack, I need you to help me. I need you to document everything they're doing right now. If this goes to court, and it looks like it will, we need concrete evidence of trespassing and harassment that goes beyond just my word against theirs. He nods, already pulling out a camera with a powerful telephoto lens. Way ahead of you. I've been building my own case file ever since I realized what Abigail was really planning. As we watch the shadowy figures moving around my cabin with their high-tech equipment, Jack hands me one final document that stops my heart. Vincent, this is a purchase agreement. Abigail has already prepared it for your property. She's planning to buy it from you at a ridiculously low, below market value after she's established legal grounds to force a sale. The document is complete, except for the signatures and dates. It lists a purchase price that's roughly half of what my cabin and land are actually worth. She's convinced that once she proves there's treasure buried on your land, you'll be so overwhelmed by legal complications that you'll accept any offer just to get out from under the mess. The sheer audacity of it takes my breath away. She's not just trying to steal some potential, imaginary treasure. She's trying to steal my entire life, my home, my peace of mind, everything I've built for myself since leaving the military. Jack, I say, feeling a cold, calm determination settling deep in my chest. Tomorrow, when she shows up demanding access to my cabin again, I'm going to confront her with everything we've discovered. No more games, no more performances. Just straight talk about treasure hunting, conspiracy, and property theft schemes. Jack looks uncertain, fear flickering in his eyes. Are you sure that's smart? If she knows that we know about her legal strategy, she might escalate things in ways we can't predict. I watch the flashlight beams dancing around my property, a silent violation of my sanctuary. I think about the purchase agreement, with my name already typed in, waiting for a signature I would never give. She's already escalated things as far as they can go, I say, my voice hard as steel. It's time to find out just how much of her plan falls apart when someone actually fights back. Comment below if you think there's actually treasure buried under Vincent's cabin or if Abigail has been chasing a 30-year-old rumor. Would you have helped Jack document Abigail's conspiracy? Abigail screams at Jack, "You've ruined everything," and storms off. But Vincent finds fresh shovel marks around his cabin foundation the next morning. Did she try digging anyway? And what did she find? Monday morning greets me not with the gentle Wyoming sunrise, but with what looks like a war zone. I step out of my cabin at dawn, coffee in hand, and stop dead. My entire yard has been torn apart, like someone set off a series of underground fireworks. Deep, angry holes dot the perimeter of my foundation. My sturdy wooden fence is broken in 3 different places, splintered and smashed. My carefully maintained landscaping, the native plants I'd spent months cultivating, looks like it went 10 rounds with a rabid bulldozer and lost badly. But here's the kicker, the detail that adds a layer of surreal class warfare to the scene of the crime. Scattered around the destruction are the remnants of their midnight party, abandoned champagne bottles, a pair of ridiculously expensive designer shoes stuck in the mud, and what appears to be a cashmere scarf caught on the jagged edge of my broken garden fence. A classy bunch, Abigail's family. Scout is going absolutely nuts, running frantically from hole to hole, sniffing and whining as if he's trying to inventory the damage for an insurance claim. I'm standing there in my pajamas and work boots, my coffee mug growing cold in my hand, just staring at the sheer devastation. And all I can think is, these people actually did it. They actually conducted an illegal, midnight excavation on my property, like some kind of deranged, high society treasure hunting expedition. The holes are deep, some of them 4 or 5 feet down, and they've clearly been made with professional equipment. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment digging with a couple of garden shovels. This was planned, coordinated, and executed with expensive, powerful tools. I'm meticulously documenting every inch of the damage with my phone when I hear the familiar, dreaded sound of approaching vehicles. Sure enough, here comes Abigail's convoy again. But this time, there's no pretense of emergency response, no charade of official authority. She climbs out of her SUV, and she's a sight to behold. Her expensive clothes are covered in dirt and mud. Her perfectly styled hair now looks like she stuck her finger in an electrical socket. Her designer outfit, probably worth more than most people's monthly rent, is ruined, and her manicured nails are broken and filthy. The woman looks like she spent the entire night wrestling with the earth itself and the earth one. Vincent, she calls out, and there's something terrifyingly different in her voice now. The fake authority is completely gone, replaced by a raw, primal desperation and a barely controlled hysteria that makes the hair on my arms stand up. I know you're hiding something. 30 years of planning can't be for nothing. She's marching toward my fence, and she's carrying a shovel like it's Excalibur. I notice her hands are shaking violently, not from exertion, but from what looks like a complete and total emotional breakdown. Behind her, her family members are climbing out of their vehicles, looking like a defeated army returning from a disastrous battle. Jennifer's fur coat is caked with mud. Robert's designer jeans are torn at the knee, and the others look like they are fundamentally questioning every single life choice that led them to this moment. I stood there, watching this woman unravel in the dirt of my ruined lawn. Abigail, I said, my voice eerily calm. It's over. You and your family destroyed my property looking for an imaginary treasure. You're trespassing, you're conducting an illegal excavation, and you're about to be facing some very serious legal consequences. But instead of backing down, she starts laughing. And it's not the kind of laugh you ever want to hear from someone who is holding a shovel. It's a high, unhinged sound that echoes unnervingly in the morning air. Imaginary, she shrieks, waving the tool around like a weapon. My father spent decades researching this property. The previous owner told him exactly where it was buried. That's when the full, tragic scope of this obsession hits me. Abigail, your father's been dead for how many years? And you're still chasing stories he told you. Her face contorts with a mixture of rage and grief that is genuinely frightening to witness. He died trying to get back what belongs to our family. This property, this treasure, it should have been ours. She raises the shovel high above her head, and for a terrifying moment, I think she's going to take a swing at me. Instead, she turns and starts attacking my cabin wall, screaming with each powerful, desperate blow. There has to be something. Unlock this cabin or I'll tear it down myself. The sickening sound of metal hitting would echoes across the property as Abigail goes completely, violently unhinged. She's beating my cabin like it personally offended her ancestors. I'm watching $30,000 worth of restoration work being destroyed in seconds by a woman having what can only be described as a complete psychological break. Behind her, her family members are starting to back away, their expressions a mixture of horror and shame. I guess watching your relatives demolish someone's home with hand tools is where most people, even those bound by family loyalty, draw the line. That's enough. I shout, pulling out my phone to finally call 911. But before I can dial, something completely unexpected happens. Jack appears from behind one of the vehicles, moving quickly, urgently, toward Abigail. "Aunt Abigail, stop," he calls out, and my blood runs cold as I process what he just said. Aunt Abigail. Jack isn't just my neighbor who got caught up in this mess. He's part of Abigail's family. The man I trusted, the person I thought was helping me, has been playing me from the very beginning. Jack, I say, and the betrayal hits me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. You're related to her. He looks at me, and his face is a canvas of genuine anguish. He's torn between helping his clearly unhinged aunt and protecting someone he's apparently grown to care about as a neighbor. Vincent, it's not what you think, he starts, but Abigail cuts him off with a venomous shriek. Jack, you worthless traitor, she screams, turning the shovel toward him, her eyes wild with fury. I offered you 10% of everything we found. Your own family means nothing to you. And that's when I understand the real, painful complexity of what's been happening. Jack wasn't just documenting Abigail's crazy behavior to protect me. He was trying to protect his family from themselves. The recordings, the warnings, the secret midnight meeting, it was all his desperate attempt to find a middle path between his twisted family loyalty and basic human decency. Jack, I say carefully, my voice low and steady. Are you with her, or are you with me right now? The question hangs in the air like smoke as Abigail continues her senseless assault on my cabin wall, and the rest of the family watches their 30-year treasure hunting expedition fall apart in real time. Jack looks at his aunt, really looks at her, as she continues her destructive rampage, covered in mud and screaming about family legacy while wielding a shovel like a medieval weapon. Then he looks at me, standing on my porch in my pajamas, watching months of his family's planning destroy my property and potentially my faith in human nature. I'm calling the sheriff, he says quietly, pulling out his own phone. Aunt Abigail, you need help. And this has gone way too far. The look of utter betrayal on Abigail's face when she hears her own nephew turning against her would be heartbreaking if it weren't attached to someone who was actively destroying my home. You're all against me, she wails, finally throwing the shovel down and collapsing to her knees in the mud. 40 years I've waited. 40 years of knowing what was buried here, and now my own family betrays me. The other family members, seeing their exit cue, start moving quickly toward their vehicles, clearly wanting to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the psychological breakdown they're witnessing. As the sound of approaching sirens grows louder in the distance, it's clear Jack wasn't bluffing about calling the sheriff. Abigail looks up at me, tears streaming down her mud-covered face. Check your basement, Vincent Watson, she says, her voice filled with the unshakable certainty of someone who has spent decades convinced of their own truth. The real treasure is under the floorboards. My father drew me a map before he died, and I know exactly where to look. Even in defeat, even covered in mud and facing imminent arrest, she's still absolutely convinced that there's something valuable hidden beneath my cabin. The sheriff's cars are pulling into my driveway as Abigail makes one final, desperate declaration. You can arrest me. You can ban me from your property. But you'll never sleep peacefully knowing there might be millions of dollars buried right under your feet. And as the deputies approach her with handcuffs, I have to admit, despite everything, despite the property damage and the lies and the complete violation of my privacy, there's a tiny, insistent voice in the back of my head wondering, what if she's actually right? As deputies handcuff Abigail, she shrieks, check his basement. The real treasure is under the floorboards. Vincent has never been in his cabin's basement. What if she's actually right about something being hidden down there? 3 days after Abigail's arrest, I'm standing at the top of my cabin's basement stairs. I have a heavy-duty flashlight in one hand and my phone in the other, and I feel like I'm about to descend into either the answer to all my questions or the biggest, most anticlimactic disappointment of my life. I've lived in this cabin for 3 years and have never once had a reason to explore the basement. It wasn't finished space, just a dusty, forgotten area for foundation access and storage, so I'd always figured there was nothing worth seeing down there. Now, with Abigail's final, desperate words echoing in my head, words about maps and floorboards and family treasures, I'm starting to think my assumption might have been a very costly mistake. The old wooden stairs creak under my weight as I descend into the cool, musty air. The basement is exactly what you'd expect from a cabin built in the 1970s. Rough concrete walls, exposed wooden support beams crisscrossing the low ceiling, and that unique, earthy smell that comes from decades of Wyoming weather seeping through invisible foundation cracks. But as I sweep my flashlight beam across the space, something catches my eye that stops me dead in my tracks. Built into the far foundation wall, almost hidden behind an old water heater, is a safe. And not some cheap, flimsy security box you'd buy at Home Depot. This is a serious, commercial-grade safe, the kind that looks like it belongs in a bank vault. Around it, scattered on makeshift wooden shelving, are dozens of dusty manila folders and document boxes, their labels, faded with age, marked with years from the 1990s. I approach the safe slowly, cautiously, as if it might explode if I look at it wrong. The combination lock is old, a heavy steel dial, but it seems well maintained. There's something about the way it's been integrated so seamlessly into the concrete foundation that suggests it was installed during the cabin's original construction, not added later. This isn't something someone hid in a basement. This is something someone built a basement around. My hands are actually shaking as I pick up one of the nearby document boxes and pry open the lid. I start reading through papers that appear to be property records, legal correspondence, and what look like surveyor reports, all dating back 30 years. The documents tell a story about my property that I never knew existed. The previous owner, a man named William Hartford, was apparently embroiled in some kind of major property dispute back in the 1990s, a battle involving water rights and a massive proposed land development. According to these papers, there was a plan to build a huge upscale lakeside resort, a project that would have required access to the lake through private property, including the land my cabin now sits on. Hartford, it seems, had something that the powerful developers needed, and he wasn't willing to sell or lease it to them at any price. But here's where it gets really interesting. The water rights documents contained in these files aren't just valuable, they're worth millions. Lake access rights in Wyoming, especially for a large-scale commercial development, are like striking gold. The papers I'm reading show that Hartford owned not just the land under my cabin, but also the exclusive water access rights that any resort developer would absolutely need to make their project viable. And according to these documents, he was being offered insane amounts of money for those rights. We're talking 8-figure sums. That's when I find it. Tucked away in a leather-bound folder is Hartford's handwritten journal. And as I read, everything clicks into place. He writes about being relentlessly harassed by the developers, about receiving anonymous threats, about finding his property surveyed without his permission, and about being approached by various intermediaries, all trying to pressure him into selling. One entry, dated from 1994, mentions the Gonzalez family by name, describing them as aggressive representatives of the development interests. Abigail's father wasn't just some random person who heard a local treasure story. He was directly involved in the campaign to acquire Hartford's property. The journal entries become more paranoid and desperate as they progress. Hartford describes installing new security measures, meticulously documenting every single interaction he has with the developers and their representatives, and eventually making the decision to secure all of his documentation in a place where it could not be stolen or destroyed. The final entry, dated just 2 months before Hartford's death, reads, "If something happens to me, the truth about the water rights and the harassment is protected." The safe combination is my daughter's birthday, the daughter they never knew I had. My brain is spinning as I try to process what this all means. Hartford wasn't hiding treasure in the traditional sense. He was protecting legal documents, evidence that proved the developers, including Abigail's family, had been engaged in a campaign of harassment and potentially illegal tactics to acquire his property. The treasure Abigail has been obsessing over for decades isn't gold or cash. It's evidence. Evidence that could destroy her family's reputation and possibly expose long-buried, decades-old crimes. I'm still trying to process this staggering revelation when my phone rings, the sound echoing eerily in the silent basement. It's Jack, and he's calling from what sounds like a noisy public place. "Vincent, I need to see you immediately," he says, his voice tense. "Abigail made bail this morning, and she's not backing down. She's telling everyone who will listen that you're hiding millions of dollars worth of treasure on your property. And she's talking about getting a court order to force you to allow a search." The urgency in his voice cuts through my distraction. "There's something else, too," he adds. "She knows about the safe." How could she possibly know about the safe? I ask, though even as I say it, I'm realizing there are several possibilities, and none of them are good. Her father might have told her. Or maybe the previous owner mentioned it to someone before he died, Jack says, his voice rushed. But Vincent, if she gets legal backing for a search warrant, you need to know what's in that safe before anyone else does. He's right, of course. But the thought of opening something that's been sealed for 30 years, something that holds such a dark and complicated history, feels like crossing a line I can't uncross. Jack, I say, making a decision that feels both inevitable and terrifying. Meet me at my cabin in 1 hour. Bring whatever documentation you have, your recordings, anything else that might be relevant. If we're going to end this thing, we need to know the whole truth. After I hang up, I spend another 20 minutes frantically going through Hartford's papers, searching for any clue, any mention of his daughter's birthday, or any other information that might help me open that safe. When Jack arrives, he's carrying a laptop bag and wearing the weary expression of someone who hasn't slept in days. I've been going through everything I recorded, plus doing some research into my family's history with this property, he says, setting up his laptop on my kitchen table. Vincent, there's something I need to tell you about why I really moved next to your property. The way he says it makes my stomach drop. I didn't just happen to become your neighbor. Abigail arranged for me to buy that house specifically so I could keep an eye on your property and report back to her about your activities. The betrayal hits me like a physical blow, even though part of me had already suspected it. So everything, the neighborly friendship, the help with yard work, the conversations over the fence, it was all surveillance? Jack looks genuinely pained. It started that way. Abigail convinced me that you had stolen property that belonged to our family, and she just wanted to know when you might be planning to sell or move. But Vincent, after getting to know you, after seeing how decent and normal you are, I realized she was lying. About everything. He shows me recordings on his laptop, conversations with Abigail where she talks about heritage and family legacy and taking back what's rightfully ours. But as the recordings progress, her language becomes more desperate and unhinged. In the most recent ones, made just days before her arrest, she's talking about divine justice and her ancestral calling and other phrases that sound like she's completely detached from reality. Jack, I say, looking at the mountain of evidence spread across my table and thinking about the heavy steel safe downstairs. I think your aunt has been chasing ghosts for 30 years, and I think I might have the proof. I tell him everything about the documents, the journal entries, and the massive safe built into my foundation. His face goes white as I describe what I found. Vincent, if those documents prove what I think they prove, opening that safe isn't just about treasure or property rights. It's about exposing a conspiracy that my family has been covering up for decades. We're interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Through my window, I can see Abigail climbing out of a car. But this time, she's not alone. She's brought what appears to be a full legal team and someone carrying professional surveying equipment. She's not waiting for a warrant, Jack says grimly. She's trying to force the issue. And as I watch Abigail march toward my door, carrying a stack of official-looking papers and wearing the expression of someone who believes divine justice is finally within her grasp, I realize we're about to find out exactly how far someone will go when they're convinced they're fighting for their family's soul. Vincent finds the second safe behind the first one, still locked with a different combination. Jack goes pale when he sees it and whispers, "Oh no, she doesn't know about that one yet." What else is hidden in Vincent's basement? The moment Jack sees the second safe, his reaction tells me everything I need to know about how deep this rabbit hole really goes. He stumbles backward as if he's been physically struck, his face draining of color so fast I think he might actually faint. "Oh God," he whispers, his eyes wide with a new kind of horror. He's staring at the smaller, newer safe that was mounted behind the first one, partially hidden by decades of accumulated storage and dust. Vincent, she doesn't know about that one. Nobody knows about that one. The second safe is completely different from the first. It's smaller, more modern, and positioned in a way that suggests it was installed secretly, perhaps years after the basement was originally built. While I managed to crack the combination of the first safe using the date I found for Hartford's daughter's birthday, this one has a more modern digital lock. It's going to require either the exact code or some serious professional help to open.
Jack, I say, trying to keep my own voice steady despite the fresh wave of unease washing over me. What exactly do you know about this second safe that's making you look like you've just seen the devil himself? He sits down heavily on an old wooden storage crate, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of pure distress that reminds me painfully of Abigail's own nervous habits. My grandfather, Abigail's father, he used to tell stories about this property when I was a kid. Stories about how the original owner, Hartford, was hiding more than just documents. He said there were layers of secrets here, secrets that went back for generations. He looks up at me, his eyes a mixture of terror and fascination. Vincent, what if Hartford wasn't just protecting water rights documentation? What if he discovered something about the land itself, something that goes back much, much further than the 1990s?
While Jack is having his existential crisis, I'm frantically going through the contents of the first safe, laying them out on a dusty workbench. And what I'm finding is making my own blood run cold. Mixed in with the water rights documents and the heated development correspondence are older papers. Much older. There are land grants from the 1800s, territorial documents from when Wyoming was still a frontier, and what appears to be correspondence with local tribal representatives dating back over a century. The picture these documents are beginning to paint suggests that the water rights dispute in the 90s was just the tip of a massive, historical iceberg, an iceberg that goes back to the original settlement of this entire area. That's when I find the letter that changes everything. It's a handwritten note, dated just 1 week before Hartford's death, addressed simply to whoever finds these documents. In it, he writes, "The development pressure was just the beginning. When I began to research the true history of this land to strengthen my legal position, I discovered documentation that proves this entire area, including the lake, was never legally transferred from the original tribal owners. The second safe contains the original treaty documents and the correspondence that prove the current land ownership throughout this entire region is legally questionable." My hands are literally shaking as I read this, because the implications are absolutely staggering. "Jack," I say slowly, my voice barely a whisper. "According to these documents, it's not just my cabin. Potentially dozens of properties around this lake might be built on land that was never properly purchased from the tribal owners." He looks up from his own frantic research on his laptop, and I can see in his eyes that he's reached the same terrifying conclusion. "Vincent, if that's true, then every single property owner in this area, including my family, could potentially face legal challenges to their ownership." It's at that exact moment that we hear Abigail's voice from outside. But this time, she's not just yelling at me. She's talking to what sounds like a group of lawyers and government officials. Through the kitchen window, I can see she's brought a small army of people in suits, along with surveyors carrying their equipment and what looks like a mountain of legal documentation. "Vincent Watson," she calls out, her voice carrying that familiar, unsettling tone of absolute certainty mixed with barely controlled hysteria. "I have a court order allowing for a limited excavation to resolve certain property boundary disputes. You can either cooperate or you can be held in contempt of court." Jack and I exchange a look that communicates about 50 different thoughts at once. The timing is too perfect to be a coincidence. Abigail somehow knows that I've been down in the basement, and she's escalating her legal tactics to force access before I can fully understand the magnitude of what I've just discovered. She's been planning this legal approach for weeks, Jack realizes out loud, his voice filled with dread. The arrest, the property damage, it was all designed to create a legal paper trail that would justify a court-ordered search. "Jack," I say, making a split-second decision that feels both inevitable and terrifying. "I need you to contact the tribal council for this area. Immediately. If these documents are authentic, they have a right to know about them before anyone else gains access to them." But even as I say this, I'm realizing the magnitude of what I'm potentially unleashing. If Hartford was right about the tribal land rights, I'm no longer just dealing with Abigail's family obsession. I'm dealing with a complex legal situation that could affect hundreds of families and millions of dollars in property values. The sound of equipment being unloaded outside forces us to move faster. I quickly begin photographing every single document in the first safe with my phone, while Jack starts making frantic phone calls, trying to reach the right tribal representatives. But as we work against the clock, I keep staring at that second safe, wondering what could possibly be so important that Hartford felt the need to hide it even from the mountain of documentation he was already protecting. Jack, I asked during a brief lull in the activity outside, in all your grandfather's stories about this property, did he ever mention anything about tribal artifacts or sacred sites? The look on his face answers my question before he even says a word. Oh no, he breathes, staring at the second safe as if it might contain nuclear weapons. Vincent, what if Hartford didn't just discover that the land transfers were legally questionable? What if he discovered that this specific site has cultural or religious significance that was never properly addressed? The thought makes my stomach drop because disturbing sacred sites isn't just a legal issue. It's a federal crime, one that can carry serious prison time. We're interrupted by a loud, authoritative knock on my door that sounds more like a demand than a request. Mr. Watson, calls a voice I don't recognize. This is County Surveyor Johnson. I have a court order requiring your cooperation with a boundary survey that includes limited excavation rights. Please open your door immediately, or we will be forced to proceed without your cooperation. The official tone and the specific legal language tell me that Abigail has somehow managed to get legitimate legal backing for her treasure hunt. Our time for private investigation just ran out. Vincent, Jack says urgently, whatever you decide to do about that second safe, you need to do it now. Once they start their boundary survey, they're going to discover this basement, and then all of this becomes evidence in a legal proceeding that could take years to resolve. He's right, of course. But the thought of opening something that might contain sacred artifacts or culturally sensitive materials without proper tribal consultation feels like a profound violation of everything I believe in. The knocking on my door is getting more insistent, and I can hear Abigail's voice mixed in with the official demands. He's stalling. He knows we're close to finding everything my father worked for. Her desperation is audible, even through the thick cabin walls. And I realize that regardless of what's in that second safe, her 30-year obsession is about to reach its climax, one way or another. The only question is whether I'm going to be part of the solution or just another part of the problem. As I stand there looking at the second safe, holding documents that could rewrite the land ownership history of an entire region, listening to legal officials demand access to my property while Abigail screams about family justice right outside my door, I'm faced with a choice that will define not just the resolution of this immediate crisis, but potentially my relationship with this entire community for the rest of my life. And the worst part is I have about 30 seconds to make a decision that could affect hundreds of people I've never even met. Comment below what you would do in Vincent's situation. Keep the cabin and stay quiet about the tribal documents, or risk everything to do the right thing. Do you think Abigail will try to use this discovery against him? As Vincent signs a cooperation agreement with tribal representatives, Abigail's lawyer arrives with news that changes everything. My client is willing to drop all charges in exchange for 50% ownership of whatever agreements you make. Does Abigail somehow still have legal leverage from prison? The timing is so perfect it's almost suspicious. I'm literally shaking hands with the tribal representative we finally managed to contact, an elder named Ellie Crowfeather. We've just signed a preliminary agreement for cultural consultation regarding the land and whatever artifacts might be contained in the second safe. At that exact moment, a sleek black sedan pulls into my driveway and a man in an expensive suit climbs out, carrying a briefcase that probably costs more than my truck. Mr. Watson, he calls out, approaching with the kind of smooth, predatory confidence that comes from winning too many legal battles. I'm Attorney Davidson, representing Ms. Abigail Gonzalez. I believe we have some business to discuss. The tribal representative, a wise, elderly woman who has been patiently explaining the proper protocols for handling potentially sacred materials, looks at the approaching lawyer with the kind of weary expression usually reserved for people who show up uninvited to funerals. Vincent, she says quietly, her voice calm but firm, I think your situation just became more complicated. She's got that right. Having a high-powered lawyer show up just as I'm trying to do the right thing about tribal land rights feels like the universe's idea of a really twisted, unfunny joke. Attorney Davidson doesn't wait for introductions before launching into what is clearly a well-rehearsed speech. My client is prepared to drop all criminal charges, cease all legal actions regarding property boundaries, and withdraw her civil suits against you for property damage, he says, opening his briefcase with a theatrical precision meant to impress. In exchange, she requests a 50% partnership in any agreements, discoveries, or financial arrangements you make regarding the materials found on this property. The way he says it, like he's offering me the deal of the century, makes me want to both laugh and throw up at the same time. Let me get this straight, I say, looking back and forth between the smirking lawyer and Ellie Crowfeather, who is watching this entire development with the infinite patience of someone who has seen every possible permutation of human greed over the course of 8 decades. Abigail destroys my property, gets herself arrested for trespassing and vandalism, spends months harassing me with fake emergencies, and now she wants to be my business partner? Attorney Davidson's polished smile doesn't waver. My client has extensive documentation proving her family's historical connection to this property and its hidden assets. She is prepared to share this documentation as part of a mutually beneficial partnership arrangement. That's when Jack, who's been standing quietly by, finally starts laughing. And it's not the good kind of laugh. It's a bitter, incredulous sound. "Mr. Davidson," he says, stepping forward with his phone in his hand. "I have hours of digital recordings of your client admitting that her extensive documentation consists of stories her dead father told her and maps he supposedly drew based on 30-year-old rumors. She has no legal claim to anything on this property." The lawyer's smile falters for the first time since he arrived, which tells me that Jack just hit a major nerve. Ellie Crowfeather chooses this precise moment to join the conversation, and her timing couldn't be more perfect. "Excuse me," she says, her voice carrying a polite firmness that immediately commands attention. But before anyone discusses any partnership arrangements, we need to address the fact that this land may never have been legally transferred from its original owners. The documents Mr. Watson has shared with us suggest that all current ownership claims, including those of his family and Ms. Gonzalez's family, may be legally questionable. The look on Attorney Davidson's face when he hears this is absolutely priceless. It's the look of a man who just discovered that his expensive, imported car is actually a stolen bicycle. "I beg your pardon," he stammers, clearly not prepared for this particular, massive complication. But my client's legal research indicates no tribal involvement in the ownership history of this property. Ellie Crowfeather's expression doesn't change, but something in her eyes suggests she's dealt with countless lawyers who have made incorrect assumptions about tribal land rights before. "Your client's research appears to be as thorough as her emergency response credentials," she says dryly. That's when I realize what's really happening here. Attorney Davidson isn't just representing Abigail in her delusional treasure hunting fantasy. He's part of a larger, calculated legal strategy designed to legitimize her claims through official channels. "Mr. Davidson," I say, feeling the final pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. "How long have you been working with Abigail on this property issue?" His brief hesitation tells me everything I need to know. My client retained my services 6 months ago for property research and recovery assistance, he admits stiffly. And suddenly, Abigail's entire unhinged campaign makes perfect, cynical sense. The fake emergency responses, the community theater with her family, the escalating harassment, it was all designed to create a legal paper trail that would support a claim of adverse possession or some other obscure property law mechanism. Abigail wasn't just obsessed with old treasure stories. She was following cold, calculated legal advice on how to establish a claim to my property through documented attempts at access and use. She's been building a legal case this whole time, I realize out loud. The emergency shelter claims, the inspection demands, even the property damage, it was all designed to establish some kind of legal standing. Jack pulls out his phone and starts playing one of his recordings. Abigail's voice, clear as day, is heard talking to someone on the phone about establishing community use patterns and documenting access attempts for legal purposes. Attorney Davidson's expression shifts from confident to deeply concerned as he realizes his client's supposedly secret legal strategy has been recorded by her own nephew. Those recordings were made without consent, he says quickly, grasping at legal straws. But Ellie Crowfeather shakes her head. Not on tribal land, they weren't. And if these documents are authentic, we are standing on tribal land right now. The next 20 minutes feel like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Attorney Davidson tries various legal arguments for why Abigail deserves partnership rights, but each one falls apart when confronted with the reality of the documents I found and the potential tribal land claims. Ellie Crowfeather patiently explains the federal laws governing sacred sites and cultural artifacts, which effectively trump any state-level property law issues Abigail might try to raise. And Jack continues to play recordings that demonstrate the calculated, premeditated nature of his aunt's entire campaign. Finally, Attorney Davidson admits defeat in the only way lawyers can, by claiming his client's position has evolved and that new information requires a reassessment of strategic options. What he really means is that Abigail's treasure hunting expedition has turned into a legal nightmare that could expose her to federal charges for disturbing tribal sites, and no amount of money is worth that kind of risk. My client is prepared to withdraw all claims and cease all contact regarding this property, he says, packing up his expensive briefcase with considerably less theatrical flair than when he arrived. The true resolution, however, comes when Ellie Crowfeather and I finalize the cultural consultation agreement. It's decided that the second safe will be opened under proper tribal supervision. Any artifacts found within will be handled according to strict federal protocols, and the land itself will be managed through a co-stewardship arrangement that honors both the current residents and the historical tribal claims. It's not the treasure partnership Abigail dreamed of, but it's something much more valuable, a solution that respects everyone's rights and interests. Before they left, after the lawyer had sped away in his sedan, Ellie had one last look at the documents. She found a packet of letters at the bottom of the box, bound in twine. They were addressed to me. They were from my late uncle, the one who had told me about this property in the first place, insisting it was the perfect, quiet place for a veteran to find peace. My uncle, it turned out, was William Hartford's lawyer and his best friend. The letters explained everything. He knew about the land's sacred history and the harassment Hartford had endured. He couldn't reveal the secret outright, but he guided me here, trusting that my character, forged in the Marines, would lead me to do the right thing when the time finally came. It was never about treasure. It was about stewardship. And for the first time since this all began, I felt a sense of peace. Everything had worked out exactly as intended 30 years ago. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my porch with Scout, watching a traditional blessing ceremony take place by the lake. The second safe, opened with reverence, contained exactly what Ellie Crowfeather suspected: sacred items and documentation of cultural sites that had been protected by Hartford after he realized their profound significance. Abigail served her sentence quietly and moved away immediately upon her release. Jack, finding his own path to redemption, has become the community liaison for the new tribal co-stewardship program. And my cabin now sits at the heart of a cultural preserve that protects both the lake's natural beauty and its deep historical significance. The electronic gate still protects my immediate property, but now it bears a new sign: Sacred Land, Cultural Center, Visitors Welcome. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is just right, I can hear the faint sound of Abigail's car driving slowly past on the distant road. Never stopping, never approaching. Just a ghostly reminder that some obsessions take much longer to heal than others. And that's how VD Stories ends this wild ride of HOA madness and buried secrets. If this story had you on the edge of your seat wondering what Abigail would do next, smash that like button and let me know in the comments. Goodbye everyone, and I'll see you in the next video where we dive into another unbelievable true story that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about your neighbors. Still here? You're one of us now. Subscribe to HOA Unfiltered and binge like your group chat depends on it.